again, it's about the people. So do you have the people who are able to display empathy? Not everybody has that, right? Not everybody thinks about the other person sitting in front of you. We're so used to, again, technology. We've got a generation that's grown up knowing nothing but technology and now social media. So we have a different culture where we often lose that empathy. So, do you have someone who is representing your group sitting at the front desk who is able to actually handle the process while there's multiple things going on. You've got patients coming in, you've got phones ringing, you've got providers who need something from you. Is that person sitting at your front desk able to handle that and still work with empathy with the people who are in front of them? From the provider side, from the healthcare side, put yourself in their place, right? Put your I am a patient and I'm feeling ill. What do I need? If you think from that level, and you know I always think of it from the terms of my grandmother because my grandmother is a saint in my eyes. And so I would want to think of it as how would I want somebody treating my grandmother? And then that's how I want all of my team treating our patients. And if we're not doing that, then we need to take a step back and reflect, why aren't we? Where did we lose the humanness in this process? Because it's literally about taking care of humans. So we got to remember that. So hire people, hire team members who understand that level of empathy and who can work under pressure and stress, and maintain empathy.
Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to Scaling Practice Management, where we help practice managers grow smarter, not harder. My name is Jakub Grajcar. I'm the head of marketing at Talk AI, where we deliver AI medical receptionist voice agents for medical practices. And my guest today is Christina King, VP of Revenue Cycle Management Operations at Nevada Heart and Vascular Center. Christina, how are you doing today?
I am great, Jakub. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. Not our first conversation, is important to note, and there are certain things that you said in our previous conversation before the show that I actually wanted to just explore a little bit more today. Definitely we'll be touching upon revenue cycle management, but some other things as well. But for right now, I wanted to warm us up a little bit with the first question of the day, and that one is not related to business, not related to medical practices at all. I just think it's important for the watchers and listeners to also get to know our guests a little bit from the personal side and from a fun side. So, Christina, what is the most fun thing you've done this year thus far?
Well, I've done a lot of fun things, but I just recently went on an Alaskan cruise and we went whale watching, and that was pretty awesome. But I have to say, we definitely saw humpback whales, quite a few of them. We saw sea lions, we saw some Dawes porpoises, which is pretty cool because they're like a mini version of an orca, a killer whale. So that was a great highlight of the cruise, but also went to a glacier, saw several glaciers actually, and had a pretty fun time on the actual ship as well. And there was a disco night, which was actually phenomenal. So just a really great time on the cruise.
Wow. Okay. That is such a cool. I mean, this is not the first time I'm hearing cruise as a response to that, but that one is certainly unique. Was there anything about the whales or the other aquatic animals that surprised you?
I think it surprised me with the whales because I thought they would be, I thought they would be jumping out of the water and splashing, but because they're very large, humpbacks are very large. And what I saw was a lot of gracefulness. I mean, they just eased through the water, no splashes. It was very calm and quiet. So I was shocked by that, but it was awesome to see that something so large, 60 feet, could be so smooth and basically just glide. So it was really amazing.
That's nice. That gives me chills, actually. Trying to picture it. I love asking this question because it always takes me places, places my guests have been, and I hope to see something like that in my life as well. So that's cool. That's a super cool answer, and I think I'll pull up some videos of whales after this just to have a taste of that. That's super nice. We'll get into the kind of the main meat of the show, if you will, now. And first of all, I spoiled this for you a little bit earlier, but you will get, as every other guest gets, the number one tip question, the traditional question of the show. So, Christina, what is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice?
You have to have, a perspective of what's important in healthcare, right? So, and I think we've lost that, quite frankly. I think, we're and here I am sitting in revenue saying this, but we are literally becoming more about the dollar, the revenue than we are the people. So I want to take a step back from that and start with the people. Because if we don't have patients and we don't have employees, we don't have a practice. I mean, AI is emerging and that's great, but without the people, you get nowhere. So let's take it back to the people and let's remember that we are real people that are patients on the end of the healthcare and we are also employees working in healthcare. And start there. That's our foundation. That's our if we don't have patients, we're going nowhere. So take it back to the patients. Remember they're humans and that they're real lives. They have real problems and we need to focus on that. Let's focus on the employees that are working for us and their needs as well. Have empathy for both the patients and the employees. Put that first and then see the outcome that you get because output is based on input. So, what are you inputting into the people? And then from there, you have to have the process that the people follow, right? So, what is your process? What are your workflows? Because healthcare was around, decades, centuries prior to technology. And they had to have a process around it, even without the tools. So, what's your process? Because if you don't have the people and you don't have the process, you can't make the technology work for you. So, what is the process? What are the workflows in place that you can use, even if you don't have the technology available? Because we all know there are outages, they happen. So, what are you going to do when that happens? Have that process in place. And then you build from there and you add in the technology. Now, a lot of people may forget this, but technology is a tool. As much as a mop is a tool, as much as a car is a tool. It's a vehicle to get us somewhere. So you use the technology with that knowledge that it is based on the input we put into the technology, how we use it, how we drive the car, where we're going to go, right? So I may be able to drive a car, but put me in an F1 and I'm probably going to crash and burn, right? Because I really don't know how to drive an F1 car. But, the same applies to technology. You've gotta make sure your end user knows how to use the technology to produce the outcome that you need, the desired result, which we often forget that too. We think technology is gonna solve all the problems, but if you don't know how to use the technology, you're gonna get nowhere. So, remember the priorities and the foundation. People first, empathy, lead with empathy, treat with empathy, right? We've gotta remember human beings. The process has to be well established, and then the technology has to be used appropriately. Use it to the best that you can, optimize it the most you can, and make sure it's working for you as you work with it.
Yes, that is a very substantive number one tip. A lot of meat there, definitely. And I just want to say, for context, we're recording this. I hope you won't mind me disclosing at like 7 a.m. your time, and you're coming in with this morning energy. I love it, right? For me, it's 4 p.m. right now. My day is kind of coming to a close, so that the difference is tangible, right? Uh, this is awesome. So look, I have a couple follow-up questions about this actually, because I feel like you talked about both empathy and processes and technology. For the first two, I'm kind of wondering how to marry the two, right? What I mean is, a lot of practice managers, I'm sure, are gonna agree that there's, more that we should make more room for empathy, that it's an important factor, that we should take care of the patients. I mean, it's something that seems obvious. On the other hand, of course, when they're constructing processes and workflows, efficiency comes to mind, and productivity comes to mind, and throughput comes to mind. So, what's your advice for baking empathy into the processes, into the workflows, to make sure that the patients still feel well taken care of?
Absolutely. Again, it's about the people. So, do you have the people who are able to display empathy. Not everybody has that, right? Not everybody thinks about the other person sitting in front of you. We're so used to, again, technology. We've got a generation that's grown up knowing nothing but technology and now social media. So we have a different culture where we often lose that empathy. So, do you have someone who is representing your group sitting at the front desk who is able to actually handle the process while multiple things going on? You've got patients coming in, you've got phones ringing, you've got providers who need something from you. Is that person sitting at your front desk able to handle that and still work with empathy with the people who are in front of them? Now, there's this is two-sided because this is a relationship between the patient that's coming in and the person who's interacting with them. So, we're not always going to get empathy from the patients because they're sick, they're in pain, they're scared, and we have to know that from the provider side, from the healthcare side, put yourself in their place, right? Put your I am a patient and I'm feeling ill. What do I need? If you think from that level and you know I always think of it from the terms of my grandmother because my grandmother is a saint in my eyes. And so I would want to think of it as how would I want somebody treating my grandmother? And then that's how I want all of my team treating our patients. And if we're not doing that, then we need to take a step back and reflect why aren't we? Where did we lose the humanness in this process? Because it's literally about taking care of humans. So we got to remember that. So hire people, hire team members who understand that level of empathy and who can work under pressure and stress and maintain empathy.
I'm really tempted to keep drilling into that actually, because hiring obviously came to my mind, right? You're looking for people with empathy in the hiring process, but how do you actually check for that in the hiring process? Do you have any tips for that?
It can be challenging, right? Because you are going through multiple interviews and making sure that you've chosen the right person can be challenging. And you may not hit it out of the park the first few times, but you tend to learn people and interact with them in different ways. And I've had quirky ways of interviewing people, and I don't do the standard interview process. I really want to have an interaction where I get to the true person, right? So, what are the meat and potatoes behind this? What's the person really able to do? And so I look for more interactive ways to find out what that person is about. I don't care for the standard interview questions because what do they really give you? They give you the surface level answers. So be more proactive in the questions you're asking, give scenarios of things that you know are going to happen. Let's be real. I have to be authentic. I can only be authentic. I couldn't try to fake an interview or a conversation if I wanted to because I'm just not made that way. And I'm looking for people who are also made that way. So if you can connect with somebody, if you can ask the crazy questions and get real feedback, you're probably going to be able to see who the real person is. And you can know when somebody is just, giving you surface level answers. You can be intuitive, and you can often spot the fakes, right? I don't wanna just have an answer spit back to me that's just, "I think you wanna hear this kind of answer." I want a real answer. And so if I'm not getting a real answer, I'm probably gonna dig a little deeper.
That's great. I'm looking for that when I'm interviewing people on the podcast too. Like there are, I feel like when I initially ask a question, I sometimes share them before the show, as you well know, but then I like to follow up and dig deeper. And that's where I think we get into kind of the real nitty gritty of it and what people actually think. And that's great. So still within this, topic, so it feels like, would you be able to share with the audience like a typical question that you ask? Do you have any favorites? I certainly do when I'm hiring, right? Anything that you do to check for, for empathy or to make people kind of drop that mask?
I wanna talk about them a little bit, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, and I do say that, I preface that in my interviews because I'm talking to people again. I always say people first, and even going into my interviews and when I'm being interviewed, I like to introduce myself and give some facts because I may be the VP of Revenue Cycle Management Operations, but truly, I'm Christina King and I have a life, I have a family, I have interests just like the crews. And so I want to talk to people about who they are, right? So tell me a little bit about yourself. That's very surface level. So let's dig a little deeper into that. What are your, hobbies? What do you like to do outside of work? Who is that person? And that will give me a little bit better insight into what they really are.
That's really great. I think I might steal some of that for the next time we're hiring or I'm hiring. So that's really, and like it seems like we have a very similar approach because the, most fun thing you've done this year thus far question. I mean, not to go, breaking the fourth wall too much, but it's exactly the same. I want to meet my guests also on this personal level and to find out something more personal about them. So that's great. The other thing that comes to mind, I just wanted to add as a comment, it's interesting how, you were talking about empathy. We're talking a lot about empathy at Talkie AI right now as well, because we found that, we're reading the transcripts of the conversations with our AI medical receptionist, right? And the receptionist can really competently right now, get the job done, right? It can help schedule an appointment, cancel an appointment, uh, refill prescriptions, those kinds of processes. What we're finding though is that we need to also do the work of building the empathy in, right? Sometimes we get some, the patient would say something that's a little bit more emotional in nature. And it turns out that, that's another area that we need to take care of as well. And we're iterating on that quite rapidly, but it's a really important side of the job. And I think, we're finding as well over here in AI land, so to speak, that it's really, really important to take care of that. All right. So I'm I have a feeling like the whole episode could be about empathy right now. I have one last follow-up question about that. And that's let's say somebody has an established team, they're not hiring, anytime soon, but they still feel like they might have this empathy problem, right? That, they're seeing interactions they're not 100% happy with. What would your advice be for either feedback, individual feedback, or maybe it's better to have like a whole team training about it? What would be a piece of advice for a practice manager in that position?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation. And sometimes you're just going to have people who aren't able to show that empathy. And that's unfortunate. We're going to coach, we're going to guide, we're going to make suggestions, have team building, but when it comes to the core, somebody has to be able to feel empathy. And we can reproduce it, right? We can put it surface level and hopefully we can train and teach that, but in the heat of the moment, you have a patient who's upset. They've been waiting. The doctor's behind. We've got a 45-minute wait right now. The waiting room is full. Somebody is sick. They don't want to wait anymore. They're getting frustrated. Trying to deal with that scenario truly does require a level of personal empathy and personal experience with that scenario and putting yourself in that person's place. So when I am talking to people, I literally do this with my team today. Like I said, my go-to is my grandmother. I ask them, who in your life, if this were that person, who is that person first of all, and how would you treat them in this scenario? How would you expect them to be handled if they were sick, if they were in pain, if they were in need? What would you want to happen with that person? It might even be themselves, but again, I always go to my grandmother. She's number one in my book, and if somebody mistreated my grandmother, that'd probably be a bad scenario. So, you know, I think, I I just recently had an incident where my she's very elderly, and she went to the emergency room, and they didn't handle it well, and I'm 2,000 miles away, unfortunately, so I couldn't be there with her, and she tells me what they said to her, and I wanted to immediately fly there and handle
Yeah.
the situation,
Show them
so
what's what. Yeah.
authentic, this is me. And,
Yeah.
I but that's the level of empathy that I want my team to have for these patients that are coming in, because when I'm on the phone with a patient, when I'm in the office and interacting with a patient, that's what my go-to is. How would I speak to my own grandmother? How would they speak to theirs? So go to that level with them. Dig it out, who is that person for you that, you could really put yourself in this position and say, okay, this is what I would want. I understand now. And so that's where I go with it.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here. It's really, it's real and it's raw and it takes you places where, you think of your own family. I feel like this role taking exercise in general just works really well on the human beings. Like, I think a lot of the watchers and listeners have had this piece of advice of, I'm struggling with a problem. What would you say to a friend who's facing a similar problem? I go to therapy, for example, not hesitant to share that on the show. And one of my therapist's go-to questions is, if this were your son in that situation, what would you advise them to do? And it immediately changes how I respond to my own problems, just looking through that lens. So I feel like it's an excellent piece of advice. And I just wanted to thank you for sharing that on the show.
Absolutely. I That's my go-to, every time. What would I do if it were my grandma? How would I treat her? So I think it
Yeah.
works.
I will remember that. I will remember that for sure after the show. All right. So, okay. This is the longest that we've explored the number one tip on the show so far, but it was such a good area to dig into. I'm really grateful that we had this exploration together. So now I do also want to have a segment on revenue cycle management. This is going to be like a sharp turn from what we were just discussing. Before we dig into that, I just wanted to ask you. Okay, so obviously your title includes revenue cycle management operations. So this is your day to day. This is your area of responsibility. So could you, in your own words, explain how you see your role, what you're responsible for, what are the most important parts of it, just so we know the kind of the frame of mind that you're applying to revenue cycle management.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent topic, and it's kind of my platform. I have been involved in healthcare my entire life. My father is a physician, and so I grew up with him. This is going back decades before hospitalists were even a thing, and so I grew up with him owning a private practice, working around the clock, managing his own rounds, and we went through a really tough time when I was a teenager, because there were only 4 GPs, the private practice or in the network at the hospital where he was at the time, and there was a scenario where one of them quit, one of them actually died, and one of them jumped ship, leaving just him to manage the entire geriatric population of our area. And thankfully, it wasn't a massive town. We were only about 100,000 people, but still, that's, a lot going on for just 2 hospital systems. And he had to be creative, and he was he was working literally around the clock. I remember him coming in at 3 a.m. after doing rounds all night, and then getting back up and leaving by 6 to go do it all again. And it was very eye-opening for me even as a teenager to see him working that hard. But that's my introduction to understanding healthcare is I saw my dad working so hard, and eventually he pulled me in, and that's how I got my start is he needed me to work in the office, and that's what I did. So I was working at the mall, and he said, "No, you're working for me." And that was a done deal. I worked healthcare ever since. But that's where I really learned everything with a very busy practice. And I learned that, again, your people and your process determine what's going to happen with your revenue. Revenue cycle management is so dependent on every aspect because you have the claims life cycle and then you have the patient life cycle, right? The patient flow. And the patient presents with patient intake. And that's where revenue cycle starts. So, what is the first key thing that we're going to get from a patient? Their name, their date of birth, that demographic information, all of that has to go out on a claim. But who's taking that information? Someone in operations, right? Someone who is maybe a front desk person or a call center person, which really doesn't typically fall under revenue cycle, but that data is elemental to getting a claim paid. So the claim life cycle really starts there as well. And so understanding that operations is all rolled into revenue cycle management is key because when your operations team isn't getting you the information you need to fully file a claim, you're going to have a really hard time getting that claim paid. So that's one of the things that I've been trying to really explain to people that I speak with is how ingrained operations truly is with revenue cycle management, and making sure that all of your processes are aligned. Again, the input is aligned with the output you expect. And if it's not, your claim's not going to get paid, or it will be delayed in payment. So really very important.
It is very interesting. So, if you could try to clarify this for me, I'm imagining I'm a practice manager and I'm hearing you say, about the tight bond between revenue cycle management and operations. I wonder, as a practice manager, how should I feel about this? I know it's a bit of an esoteric question, right? But what I mean is, okay, so if there's this danger that this might influence claims and, might influence my revenue, what should I do about that? What are the steps I should take?
This is cross-functional, right? You've got teams, and they've gotta be cross-functional. They've got to work well and communicate well with each other. We've got to have points of connection, right? We've got to have those meetings. We've got to ha I know people hate meetings, but meetings do serve a purpose because it's required that we communicate with each other. If we see a trend with claims denying, we can track that back to what's causing it. And if it is member not found in a denial for a claim, and we see there is a problem with how we are gathering data for our insurances, we can track that back to who's gathering that data. Is that our front desk? What are our points of failure here? Is it our call center? Where can we correct this? So, does it start with the call center? Does it make it through to the front desk when they're checking in? And does it go beyond that? How are we managing that data input? And how can we make sure that we have checks and balances, that if it fails here at the call center, then we've got the verification team. Is it failing there? And if it's even going through there, is it failing at the front desk? So, what are our fail safes so that we don't have 3 points of failure causing us denials in the end? And that's really where the cross functional team occurs, where you have those meetings, you have those connections, and you put process in place with your people to make sure your outcome is what you need. And so, I feel that when I'm looking at this holistically, right? Again, we want to look at the patient holistically. And right now our workflow and our claims are the holistic patient. So when I'm looking at that, I want to diagnose appropriately, and I want to look at all things. I want to look at our people, I want to look at our process, and I want to look at our technology. And I want to make sure that we have all those points of failure reviewed, and make that connection and work together cohesively as a full team, not, siloed teams, but we're working together as a full team to solve the problem.
The word meetings can cause so many emotional responses in people. I talk with my friends sometimes. Sometimes I'm that person. I say, "Oh, my day is full of meetings, right? I'm not gonna get anything done." But it is true on the flip side. I'm not gonna say they're a universal good or universal bad. I think there's good and bad meetings, right? But they can be very useful, and they can have this unspoken effect that you can't necessarily track. The other thing that you said, tracking issues back to their source. I have a friend on the team here at Talkie. She calls it detective work, if you're listening to this, you know who you are. She calls it detective work, so, getting back to the source of the issues and trying to address them. So the question I had as a follow-up to that, let me see how I would phrase it. For this meeting, right? I was wondering if you could add a little bit more detail in terms of what kind of meeting you're envisioning, what's the content of the meeting, because for any type of meeting, whether it's, a weekly, a daily, one-to-one, there's a good way to run it and a bad way, and probably multiple good and bad ways. So what is your best advice on, how to add cohesiveness with that meeting, but also not overburden the team? What would you say?
Well, you have to have participation, because if they are not participating, it is a pointless meeting. It's one of those meetings nobody wants to attend. So you have to know that you have the right audience who are able to answer the questions, and then you have to know the conversation before the meeting. You have to know the data points we're going to talk about before the meeting. And so what I do is I create agendas, and I have investigated, or, the detective work before the meeting even begins. There's a purpose to the meeting. So what are we going to be talking about? Okay. I create that agenda, and then if there are specific people that I need information from, I'm creating that agenda, sending it out before the meeting, and pointing out who I need what from so that they are prepared and ready to answer during the conversation. We are using this as a point of conversation and to add to our investigation, right? Because each person is doing something different during the day, and maybe they're experiencing a problem on one side of the house, and then there's another problem on the other side of the house, but both of them are linked to the same issue, the same root cause. And so as we have that conversation and we start talking through that, and I'm calling out, we have this problem over here, and I've asked, Sally, what's happening for you? And then we have this other problem over here. I've asked John what's happening for him, and we start communicating on those calls, we will likely discover that multiple people are having the same problem, but it's appearing in different ways, but the same root cause is the reason. And so I really do use those calls with advanced preparation, knowing who needs to be on there, trying to solve for the problem and also work through it together so we can find the best path forward. So I really do try to make sure I'm very prepared and my team is prepared when we come to these meetings so we're not just wasting time.
You touched upon something, one person on the one side of the house, the other on the other side of the house. In terms of taking sides, something that tends to happen during meetings is sometimes there's conflict, right? I've experienced this as a leader. You must have experienced it yourself. What do you do when these meetings turn into, blame shifting or, they're doing this and that's making my job hard? Like, how do you deal with conflict? What's your advice?
I'm a mother of 6 children, okay? So
Okay.
I
Wow.
I often look at these meetings, like, and my friend pointed this out to me. She's my coworker, but she's also my friend. And she said, Christina, you handled these meetings so well because we have so many complaints and people don't want to do the things that need to be done. And she just, she said, you listen and then you say, okay, I understand, but we still have to get it done. And then we keep moving. And, that's literally the approach I take is that, okay, we can be upset about it, right? We can have a hard time with it. We can blame shift, and I that does happen. It honestly does happen, and I'm to the point where, okay, I don't want the blame right now, right? We are where we are. So let's stop blaming and let's find the path forward. So what do we need to do to make this happen? I know it's hard, I know it's not fun, but we've got to move forward. We can't stay here. So let's pick up the pieces and get it done. And so then we start finding the path forward. Then we start collaborating and saying, okay, this is what we can do to make this work. And that's really the goal. And yes, you're going to have people who are upset. Yes, there are people who don't want to do it. But when my kids were little and they didn't want to clean up their toys, I would literally grab their hand and help them pick up the toys. And sometimes I feel like we have to do that with our team. We have to hold their hand and help them through it. So I
Yes.
will hold your hand. I will help you in the path forward, and then we'll get to the end together. But we're still going to get to the end.
I love that. Absolutely. I need to collect myself because so many of the phrases you just used fit both scenarios perfectly, don't they? Like, I understand you're upset, but we still need to get it done. It could be a team meeting. It could just as well be a situation with like a toddler or something, right?
Yes, yes, but, the thing is we're still people, right? We still have emotions, we still get overwhelmed. Toddlers get overwhelmed, adults get overwhelmed. It doesn't change, right? And so we just have to help each other through it and see that, while we're right here in this mess, it is hard. And I know it feels like we're never gonna get out of it, but we will, and we're gonna get out of it together. And so that's really the goal.
And you're also using collective language, right? It's us in this mess together, working through it together. I feel like that's very important because otherwise it's, them versus me. And it turns into language is really important in those kinds of situations. I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they
Yeah.
need to know they're not in it alone. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That is such a good piece of advice there, and I feel like I've been running this show for a little while now. This is definitely not the first conversation, and what I'm finding is a lot of what's happening at a practice just translates to or relates, I should say, to what's happening, at an office or in a team in general, right? Just teamwork in general is an important factor. So a lot of it is just, good leadership sense, so to speak. So you're really making that very clear for me with this conversation. So speaking of the conversation, we don't have a ton of time left. Unfortunately, this could easily be an hour and a half episode, but we only have the time that we do have. So the last area that I wanted to touch upon, and again, we're going to be taking a little bit of a turn, is something that you mentioned during our conversation before the recording. So you've got this interesting story of turning from an AI skeptic. Yes, we'll be talking about AI, watchers and listeners. Either tune in or or tune out, depending on your preference. Uh, of being an AI skeptic initially, and now you're like an AI convert, so to speak. Could you tell the watchers and listeners? Well, first of all, we're imagining all of the time we're talking to practice managers. We definitely have AI skeptics in the audience. What would you say to them about, your transformation there and what they should be doing about AI?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm of the generation of the Terminator generation where Skynet is the devil and it's going to take over the world, and we got to be careful. Which there's so many people out there that remember that movie that are from my generation and probably are practice managers and executives now. And AI can be a little intimidating and scary. Everybody thinks it's going to take our jobs. Well. I didn't. I was very hesitant on using it, and I wanted to be cautious about it, but I got myself into a situation where I just had more than I could manage. I'm still working on this, some additional resources with me. And I finally decided that I had to give in and see if I could find some help in another way. And I started researching and gave in and created a ChatGPT account and started realizing that ChatGPT could help me in certain ways. And it's when I realized that, if we don't embrace it, we're going to get left behind because it is the future. And how can we use it to help us work smarter, not harder? We like to say that, but are we really doing it? And I found that I could have ChatGPT help me in certain ways. And now I'm working on my own thing because I've looked at other AI programs out there that don't really meet my need. I'm looking more for an assistant who can help me create those agendas, who can look at my summaries that I sent out from previous meetings, who can take and correlate that data and put it into a new agenda for the next meeting. So I've been working to build that functionality with along with other things with managing my schedule because I truly need an assistant and I don't have one right now. But that's where I really embraced and leaned into AI because I saw the benefits for me personally and how this could you know really work for us in other ways. If I can make this work for me, how can I make it work in the RCM platform? How can I make it work in other areas of the functionality that we have today? So I have become very involved with ChatGPT, and I'm now trying to create my own agent and working working in ChatGPT Pro so that, I can get what I need from it. But I do think it's very useful, and I think if we don't embrace it, we're gonna be left behind because it's coming whether we want it to or not. So how can we use that to enhance what we're doing rather than prevent it from helping us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely pro AI. That comes as no surprise, given that I work at at a company with AI in its domain name, right? And I feel like it's difficult getting started with this. The first steps are difficult. So for probably the last question for today, I would ask you. I often say on the show, imagine that we've got 200 practice managers, listening to this or in the audience, and it's a roundtable discussion or something. Somebody just raised their hand and asked, "Okay, I'm going to start my own ChatGPT account starting today. How would you suggest that I start? What should be my first steps? What should I prepare for? How should I do this?"
So something to know is you have to be able to ask the right questions. Those prompts are so important. And a lot of people who start using ChatGPT probably wouldn't understand how to prompt it to input equals output. So what's the input you need to get the output? What's that prompt you need to get the output? So asking the right questions is really important. I think when you I've even asked ChatGPT this question: "How should I prompt you better? What can I do to make my prompts better?" And, because I was getting frustrated with the output, and when I did that, it helped me think through the level of questions and the level of detail that I'm giving ChatGPT to assist me. So ChatGPT took me into places that I didn't know even existed and helped me create. I call my ChatGPT Data because I'm from the Star Trek Next generation, and Data is the best AI assistant I could think of. So Data has really pushed me into new areas where now I'm getting a follow-up email. I get an Excel spreadsheet every day that gets forwarded to me for items that still need to be completed from my team and from me. And so that's prompting me to go follow up on those items. Hey, this is still outstanding. Where are we at with this? And I could send that to multiple people and they could be prompted every day as well. So I've really gotten deeper into the technology with ChatGPT. I'm still working out some, bugs. It's not 100% perfect at this point, but I've learned a lot just by working with ChatGPT, asking the questions from ChatGPT, and putting now automation in place for myself.
I think that's an excellent piece of advice. If I were, if I saw somebody literally interacting with ChatGPT for the first time, the one piece of advice I would echo yours, right? It can teach you how to use it. It won't always have the best advice, and it's good to listen to some podcasts, go to YouTube and try out some, prompting advice from there. But whatever question you have, you can put it right straight into ChatGPT as well. I would add at least one more on top of that. That being, I've grown to really like the voice chat feature. Well, there's two types of voice chats, right? What I mean in particular is the microphone feature. So you just dictate to ChatGPT, it gets turned into text, and then it turns into a regular text prompt. Why I recommend it is that when you're speaking in a natural way, you're going to provide a lot more context that the AI can pick up on. I feel like it leads to better results. And the second piece of advice is like actually about that. A little more context. If you go with like very brief prompts, write me an article about X, it's gonna be a little bit poor. But if you give it at least a little bit of an outline, this is something that my team at Talkie is now finding, that if we go a little bit more detailed with the outline, I would like the sections to be about this. These are the general talking points we want to hit. The output is so much better if you just go a little bit, take a few extra steps at the beginning there.
I totally agree with that. And that was so it's kind of funny. The first thing I did with ChatGPT is I was trying to redecorate my living room, and so I started prompting ChatGPT, trying to help me, and I gave it the absolutes, right? Here's what I want. Here's my style. Don't change this. Do change this. And that comes from I do have a bit of a technology background, so I do understand some of the logical programming that goes into that. And so in my mind, I was thinking, I need to give ChatGPT logic to help me. And so that's really where I got my start, is knowing that there needs to be the absolutes, if this, then this, or if this and if this but not this, right? So I wanted to give that level of detail to ChatGPT so I could get the output I wanted. And I built from that, and that's where I really decided, okay, I can make this work for me in other ways. And that's when I started using it for my ChatGPT assistant. But Data has really helped me quite a bit, and I use it every day to help me create my meeting summaries, my meeting agendas, my, follow-up items. So I would recommend, if anybody's interested, just giving it a try. There's the free version. It won't do as much for you as, the paid version, but it can give you the idea of what can ChatGPT do for me.
Exactly. It's a great start. We call our medical receptionist agents Jessica. I mean, it can be adjusted depending on the practice, and a lot of practices pick something else, but Jessica is kind of the default name. So I just wanted to say, next time you speak with Data, tell tell them Jessica said hi, okay? I'm gonna just
I
leave it
will
at
tell
that.
Data Jessica said hi.
Awesome. Awesome. That's so cool. I wonder how we're going to be thinking or feeling about this conversation a few years from now, but let's leave it at that. So, Christina, this conversation took us so many places. We talked about empathy, we talked about revenue cycle management and AI, and I feel like we could go even deeper into each of those. Unfortunately, we don't have much more time for today, but as I often say on the show, this can be a first conversation of many. So, as we close out, I wanted to ask you just a quick question of where people can find you and follow you, to kind of initiate a conversation with you if they want to continue on the threads here, or anything else you might want to share with the watchers and listeners as we close out.
Sure. And they can find me on LinkedIn as LinkedIn's backslash IN for Indiana backslash Christina King. So feel free to reach out and connect with me there. Ask any questions. Like I said, I'm authentic. I'm an open book.
Yes, and that definitely showed in this conversation. This was so enjoyable, honestly, one of the best we've had thus far. So really, really thank you for coming on the show. And we'll close out here. Definitely a few more things to do if you like this conversation, watchers and listeners. If this is your first time, hi, super nice to have you here. The show is brought to you by Talkie AI. I talked about what we do already. Go to talkie.ai to learn more. But more importantly, for this particular moment, find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. On YouTube, we're Talkie Health, so it's on the Talkie account. Subscribe, rate, and follow us, and let us know that you like this. Or if you have any feedback, reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn too, and I would love to have a conversation with you about the show. Just for today, though, that's everything we had. Christina, I wanted to thank you once again very, very, very much for coming on the show. It was a blast. And for you watchers and listeners, thank you so, so, so much for joining us here today. And I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye, everyone.